Chapter 2. As the light faded, Victor slumped down to the ground. Jennifer, Sig, Kirana, Jonathan, and Lizard were also unconscious. Row 82, Lucas, and Stephanie looked at one another in wonder. "Where are we?" asked Row 82. "I do not recognize any of this terrain." Lucas grabbed his key and his eyes began glowing. After a few moments, he gasped. "We've gone back 1,000 years, said Lucas. 500 years before the Golden Age. Stephanie's eyes grew wide as she saw the peaceful grass-covered hills and watched small butterflies flutter around her. "Is there anyone around?" asked Lucas. Row 82 stood up and shrieked loudly. Stephanie winced and covered her ears. After a moment, Row 82 looked at them and shook his head. "Not for several miles," replied Row 82. "This looks as good a place as I've seen since going to our time, then," said Lucas as he plopped down on the ground. "Let's get some rest." Stephanie smiled. Row 82 scowled, but finally sat down out of not having anything else to do. Soon he was the only one awake. He looked up into the blue sky and watched the fluffy clouds drift by. Though he had always hated the idea of needing luxuries or comforts, he had to admit that the warm sun felt good on his skin, and the soft grass was soothing to his joints. Suddenly Jennifer gasped and sat up. Row 82 turned to face her. She looked around until she saw Victor. "What?" she asked. "Where are we?" "Calm down, Jennifer," said Row 82. "Row 82," said Jennifer. "Is everyone here?" She looked around to get the answer to her question. "Yes," he answered. Her eyes rested on Victor. "Victor," she whispered. "Yes, he was quite impressive," said Row 82. "He brought us back using your key." "What?" gasped Jennifer as she spun back to face Row 82. "He used your key and helped us escape," said Row 82. "We would have probably been defeated if he had not done that." Her eyes grew wide and she turned back to Victor. "How can anyone use more than one key?" asked Jennifer. "I don't know," said Row 82. "I'm sure Lucas was curious too, but everyone was pretty exhausted after rushing to get to you." "What?" asked Jennifer. Suddenly she remembered appearing in the future with a serious wound as she looked at the blood-stained mark on her dress. "Oh, you found me." "Yes," said Row 82. "The past couple years have been quite an adventure." "Years?" gasped Jennifer. "But I only just came after we had killed Daniel Young." "Just like the rest of us when we arrived," said Row 82. We also all came at different times." "All at different times?" asked Jennifer. "Sig was first," said Row 82. "Lucas was last. Victor wanted to stay put because he believed that you would come and wanted to be close." Jennifer smiled and blushed slightly. "In fact, it was only Stephanie that persuaded him to leave." "Stephanie?" asked Jennifer. "Ever since she was thrown back to our time, her vision seemed to have become more intense," explained Row 82. "She kept seeing the same things over and over, but she wouldn't talk to any of us to tell us more than that." "Why not?" asked Jennifer. "I don't know," said Row 82. "But eventually she gave Lucas some very specific instructions. I was only privy to them because I can see and hear so well." "You spied on them," said Jennifer disapprovingly. Row 82 tilted his head as he considered Jennifer's assessment. "Yes," he said after a moment, "I suppose that is accurate. However, she knew that I would do that." "That doesn't make it okay," said Jennifer. "I certainly paid for my indiscretion," said Row 82. "I was nearly lobotomized." "Lobotomized?" gasped Jennifer. "Zeta 28 is pragmatic, and she was not going to let me regain consciousness until I had been pacified," explained Row 82. "But Stephanie knew what would happen, and it never got that far. Before anything, we modified my voice augmentations so that a pre-recorded message could be delivered to Sig. Then we went to Zeta 28's stronghold, where we were both apprehended and temporarily modified to augment her immediate defensive needs. Temporarily modified? Asked Jennifer. What does that mean? There were a number of drugs used on us, as well as equipment that was attached to our bodies, said Row 82. They turned me into a living sensor, and they turned her into a living... Row 82 struggled to find the right word. Future sensor. Future sensor? Asked Jennifer. You know, said Row 82, a predictive tool. Finally, Jennifer nodded. Well, what happened? She asked. Lucas followed his instructions precisely, said Row 82, but Sig became extremely angry and stormed ahead of the rest of the others. They boarded trains and headed for the compound. After defeating hundreds of Zeta 28 super soldiers, Sig was captured and thrown into a cell near me. Lucas had placed a tracker on him, though, and it was not long before the others stormed through and rescued us. Then we went to free Stephanie. Zeta 28 was confident that having a lobotomized William Fine would allow her to take control of all of us, but we managed to escape with Jonathan's help. Victor then learned that you had arrived and stormed back to the crater. He did? Asked Jennifer with a smile as she turned to look at Victor. We had difficulty keeping up with him, said Row 82. Even Lizard did. We were all pretty exhausted when we finally got there, and we were not prepared to fight the Archdemon's hand, but it looked like they were ready for us. Stephanie did not seem worried, though. She had confidence that Victor would figure out what to do. What happened? What happened? Asked Jennifer. Well, Zeta 28 arrived with a huge army of super soldiers and with William Fine. It seems like William's power was greater over the other members of Archdemon's hand. Only the demon prophetess escaped becoming her puppet. She can't hold out for long, though, said Jennifer. And if they get all 5 of them, the Archdemon will be freed. Most likely, said Row 82. Then we have to stop them, said Jennifer. The Archdemon will destroy the world. That's the same reason we had to fight Abaddon in Antarctica. We need to get some rest, said Row 82 as he pointed to the others. And we need to talk to everyone and decide what would be best. Jennifer nodded. It felt to her as though she were late. Since she had no idea what she was missing, she eventually decided to get next to Victor and rest her head on his arm. Before long, she fell asleep as the peaceful breeze glided by. Row 82 looked at everyone resting and frowned. He did not feel like sleeping, but decided that he could not abandon the others. He chuckled at the hand fate had dealt him. Just a few years before, he would have killed every one of the people around him for what he considered to be blasphemy. Over time, he himself had even begun to doubt the survival of the fittest ideology that was common to almost all augments. He had come to irrationally feel as though life actually might have a purpose, and that there was such a thing as fate. He shook his head as he looked at the others. He disliked that he was so conflicted. Being a pure augment had been so simple. The philosophy, survival of the fittest, had provided all he had needed to make sense of the warring factions, greedy slavers, common citizens, and key-bearers. The feeling that life was complicated wearied him as he looked down at his own mirrored key. Row 82 decided that perhaps the existence of these complicated emotions contributed to the habits of his companions. Perhaps Lizard went on scouting assignments to divert his attention from more solemn thoughts. Perhaps Stephanie focused on her technical talents or her odd visions as an escape. Perhaps the romances he had observed would never have happened, except for the extreme circumstances that had been thrust upon them by fate. Perhaps even Sig's propensity for laughter at almost everything was a similar psychological defense mechanism against the harshness of their reality. As Row 82 thought about his friends, he realized that they had become actual friends instead of just allies of convenience. He could not deny a feeling of unexplainable happiness when Sig burst into loud laughter. He had actually enjoyed conversing with Lucas and admired his brilliance. The sensation of annoyance that came with Lizard's frequent air quote gesture had been replaced with one of endearment, and as he looked at Stephanie Mason, he felt bitter regret for having killed her mother. The intensity of these emotions had increased with time, and to complicate the situation, the more he thought about it, the more frustrated he felt. Row 82 worried that these emotions might lead him to make irrational decisions. He had seen people in slave compounds attempt the most foolish and irrational escapes or thefts in the name of a spouse, a child, or a friend. He was determined not to become a servant to such feelings, but to remain objective. Row 82 stood up and began walking around the perimeter to clear his mind. He breathed deeply and ignored the pleasant fragrances of flowers or the vibrant green color in the soft grass. He wanted to shriek, not to locate the presence of others, but to release the stress he was feeling. Of course, he knew that if he did, he would only wake one of the others, and they would want to know what was going on. Finally, he looked down again at the mirrored key on the chain about his neck. He smiled. Perhaps this would help him. As he held the warm key in his hand, his eyes began to glow. He looked around and saw large snow-covered mountains in the distance. Closer, there was a city in the foothills. Even closer was a stream that came out of the mountains. He focused on the stream. For as shallow as it was, Row 82 was surprised by the size of the fish that were swimming in it. He could see small toads and large frogs. Small birds gathered along the banks to feast on crawling insects, while waterfowl plummeted their heads into the water to swallow the smaller fish. Suddenly something splashed along the edge of the stream that caused him to gasp with surprise. It was Jennifer, rushing toward him. She looked different. Her hair was tied up, and she had a dark red satin dress with ornate patterns embroidered on it with gold thread. He turned back and noticed that Jennifer was still asleep next to Victor. He turned back to see the Jennifer in the dark red dress hurrying toward him. He froze in confusion as he watched her run. He did not know whether to conceal himself or whether he had already been discovered. Instinctively, he got down in the tall grass and grew still to watch and listen. Jennifer suddenly stopped near a bend in the stream. She was breathing heavily, and she leaned down and put her hands on her knees in exhaustion. Row 82 looked beyond her for a moment to see if she had been fleeing from something or someone, but he was unable to perceive anyone else coming. "Did you know that Ethan set up a hospital?" she asked. Row 82's eyes grew wide, but Jennifer was not looking at him. He strained to see if there was someone else there, but it appeared that she was talking to herself. "Lincoln and Savannah are still trying to fight the bad guys, but they don't even talk to the others much anymore," said Jennifer. "I wouldn't be surprised if they eloped. Do you know what Alexis Taylor is doing? She's teleporting around the world for recreation. She doesn't even care anymore." Jennifer paused as if she were listening to a response. Row 82's eyes glowed brightly, but he could not see or hear anything to explain her behavior. "I thought that finding Archdemon's hand was supposed to be important," said Jennifer angrily. "I thought saving the world was supposed to be important. I'm not even from here. I should have seen it coming. I was too late." She paused again. Row 82 did not want to move a muscle. He listened patiently. Finally, Jennifer spoke again. "That makes no sense," she said. "And why didn't Chloe catch this? You know she's off to find some family named the Pratts?" There was another brief pause. "Yeah, I know her key works differently, but all the keys work differently," said Jennifer. There was another pause. So you already knew that Levi Crawford was on suicide watch? Said Jennifer in frustration. Samuel Godwinson is spending time with him. In Ethan's hospital. Everything has fallen apart. I was supposed to meet her at her shrine, but I was too late. There was another pause. Really? Said Jennifer angrily. Another council in 500 years? Then what was the point of this one? And what if the next one falls apart? Roedy-2 realized that this Jennifer had not yet been to the Golden Age. He was witnessing her as she was. He had thought she was from this time, but she seemed to indicate that she was not. Roedy-2 was confused, but he did not want to interrupt the one-sided exchange between Jennifer Cedar and her unseen associate. So let me get this straight, said Jennifer in a low voice with her hands on her hips. I'm going to go 500 years into the future, do the same thing, and even then it won't work. Is that right? There was another pause. And the memory side effects will be worse this time? Shouted Jennifer. She turned around and began walking away quickly. Suddenly she stopped and turned back. Just tell me, she said. Just promise me that eventually all of this has a point. There was another pause. Don't get all cryptic with me, said Jennifer. Don't tell me that I will see for myself. Promise me that the sacrifices that we have asked these guardians to make have meaning. Jennifer turned back. All right, she said softly. I've come this far. When should I leave? There was a pause. Okay, she said. I might as well. I've already caused enough trouble for these people by bringing them your divine keys. Time to start fresh. Jennifer gripped her key, and in a bright flash of light, she vanished. Roedy-2 remained still. Roedy-2, came a voice from below. Roedy-2 jumped back with a start. He desperately scanned the area, hoping to find some source to the voice. Suddenly a figure appeared. It looked like Victor. No need to be upset, he said. Roedy-2 rubbed his eyes to see if they were deceiving him. My name is Michael, said the man, and I was hoping you would come here.